what people should do is, as soon as the invoice is defaulted and they've exhausted any possible ways of getting paid with that client, then they should turn to a debt collector.
So good to have you on the podcast as always.
Thanks for having me back.
I think today we're going to talk a little bit about kind of how to engage with debt collectors.
Yeah.
And I think the key question was going to be, when is the right time to commission the work or any sort of defaulted payment to a debt collector? So I guess, when is the right time?
Yeah, really, as a debt collector, I would tend to just say, well, as soon as the invoice is defaulted, we're good to go. But obviously, I recognise the fact that that's just not the case for lots of people that aren't familiar with the process of debt recovery. So lots of people tend to procrastinate, and an email conversation where we've been discussing a potential prospective client could drag on 6 months until they finally press the button on that. So really, what people should do is, as soon as the invoice is defaulted and they've exhausted any possible ways of getting paid with that client, then they should turn to a debt collector. I mean, they can always talk to a debt collector. They don't necessarily need to activate the recovery process immediately, but at least get that discussion going on.
I mean, I guess one of the challenges is, just speaking from personal experiences, there's probably a part of you that's kind of hoping that the situation will resolve itself, right?
Yeah.
So you have an invoice that's just due to be paid, and you're dealing with that client. You want to kind of keep that relationship sweet, and so you don't want to, go all out on them and go hell for leather, and then things kind of turn sour the moment you get a debt collector involved, realistically speaking, right? So I think maybe. What sort of kind of advice that you would give for people? Because once you're engaged with a debt collector, as in like they're part of the way that you do business, whether it's by outsourcing your accounts receivable to them or something like that, the reality is it's very easy to press that button, right? Because it's just somebody has, okay, your invoice is due on X date, it's over that X date, boom, go on to debt collection. But if you haven't, are there any other steps that you can think of that might be in between? Okay, your invoice is overdue, and then maybe there's a few different things, and then I would get in touch with a debt collector, or would you say the moment it's overdue, just straight ahead, Because obviously the counter side of that is you might be damaging a relationship with someone, because you're going a little bit too aggressive with it, if you know what I mean, right?
Yeah, which would be a question I was thinking about putting to you on this subject, and that would be knowing that you've obviously used debt collectors.
Sure. Yes,
before.
I have. Yes. Used, paid for.
Yes.
Yes. Absolutely.
Not any debt collector.
No, of course.
What would you say there's an impact on the client relationship?
Yeah. So I think that the main thing is it's definitely kind of a last resort for most people. It's not your first go-to. There are probably a number of different avenues that you would try to pursue before getting that, whether that's some form of, hey, let's have a commercial conversation, then let's perhaps have a legal conversation. Yeah. And then at that point, you would see that what you're really dealing with on the other side is a complete reluctance to even, have a commercial or legal conversation that would ultimately resolve in some form of mediation or some form of settlement.
Yeah.
So I would generally say that it's two things in my personal experience. One, it's time and resources. Right? Yeah. So you have this debt, but you can't be asked. And it's something that is part of your business, and maybe it's only like 0.5% of your total turnover. Yeah. And you're thinking about the 99.5% of your turnover, which is obviously what's driving your business forward. Yeah. And so you kind of just say, you know what, I'm going to forget about it. It's bad debt. Let's just move on. That's definitely one part of it. The other part of it is, well, you just don't know where to begin because you're not used to somebody just going, I'm not going to pay you. Yeah. And I think that's when you really have to take on professional help, you know.
I think you can do some steps. For example, you can try and formalize the actual communication process that you're having
Okay.
with that client,
Yeah.
just to make sure that as soon as it's become apparent that it's defaulted,
Yeah.
you could run your own 30-day chase campaign where you're just going to say, okay, we're going to give this guy 30 days. It's already defaulted. We're now going to like issue a series of warnings
Yeah.
each week. We're going to up the ante, because that's effectively what debt collectors do.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
a steady process
Yeah.
of first of all giving them the opportunity to pay, and then if that's not good enough, then you go on and on and on, add financial penalties, warn of potential legal action, etc.
Yeah.
So I think people could do that themselves even before they come to a debt collector.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the way that would play out potentially in the future if it went legal would be helpful, because you could always demonstrate, well, we gave them every opportunity to pay,
Exactly,
and nothing worked.
Yeah.
I think it's when that debtor or that client, before they become a debtor, is actually sort of saying, sorry, we're not going to pay. And I think
Yeah.
actually when you reach that moment, you absolutely should use a debt collector.
Yeah.
Leaving it any longer after that, to me, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I mean, from your side, from Payforce's side, as a debt collector, what are some of the kind of things that you need to know before you get involved? What are some of the key things that are useful to you kind of before you decide to get involved? And so what are kind of things, that the type of information that a client should be collecting when they're thinking about engaging with a debt collector?
Yeah, so I'd say like the number one thing that we need to know is who the company is and whether they are still financially solvent.
Right, okay.
Because obviously if they're not financially solvent at all, it's a completely different situation. It may not mean that you're not going to recover anything, but if they're not financially solvent, there's almost kind of no point in doing any debt collection. It's sort of a waste of our time, and you certainly wouldn't want to, invest
Well,
money
yeah, I
in
mean,
legal
ultimately
action.
you're chasing nothing,
You're
right?
chasing nothing.
Yeah.
So, and then, you should probably get in touch with an insolvency practitioner and register yourself as a
Yeah.
creditor,
I'm curious about that, by the way, because I don't have a lot of experience in terms of insolvency practitioners. I mean, it's something that I've obviously explored.
Yeah.
Not perhaps in the proudest moments of my business, because obviously it's not a particularly good place to be when you're thinking about
No.
going insolvent, but
No.
it is the reality of a business in a way.
Yeah.
It's something that you should know. So, what are some easy things that you think are worth for people to consider when they're thinking about engaging with an insolvency practitioner? So let's say, for example, they have a debt that they want to chase from somebody who's obviously going bust or is going bust. Ultimately, and correct me if I'm wrong, generally what happens is there's an insolvency or a liquidation process
Yeah.
of all the goods and assets and cash that the company has, put in front of a tribunal, and then the tribunal basically decides how to allocate it on the people that it has a debt with. Is that more or less the way it works? So generally, how does it work if a company that you have you're owed money from goes liquid or goes bust, essentially?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't get involved a hell of a lot with insolvency practitioners
Right,
or
okay.
that side, because when that sort of tends to happen, it's nothing really for a debt collector to do
Right,
anymore.
okay.
But, and this was actually going to be my kind of nugget of the week,
Sure.
but what I have found out over the years of doing this is that what a lot of companies tend to do when they hear that a company's gone belly up
Sure.
and there's an insolvency practitioner, they almost kind of go, forget about it.
Yeah.
Almost did
Yeah.
that in a kind of a
Well,
surprise.
that would be my natural response. Are you saying that they shouldn't?
No, I don't think they should. I think
Right,
one
okay.
thing that they should do is make sure they're listed as a creditor and work with that insolvency practitioner, because apparently what happens a lot is because so many companies take the view of, they've gone bust, forget it.
There's actually quite a big pot.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of people are trying to pitch into it.
Right.
Right.
So that's actually like
interesting.
a good thing for companies to do.
Right. I guess the main thing I'm really trying to understand, so, putting myself in the shoes of where I was when we first engaged together.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes back to the overarching question that we have about this, which is when is the right time to really engage with a debt collector? Are there any things that you think people should be considering when they are, I guess, considering engaging with a debt collector? Meaning, what sort of questions should they be asking themselves?
I'd say like number one question they should be asking themselves is, how do you plan on, what's your strategy going to be to
Right,
collect my
okay.
debt? Assuming that the debt isn't in the same territory of where the creditor is.
You think that's a good question to be asking the debt collector, or
Yeah,
is it- okay?
I think
right.
I think that you need to ask the debt, because it's. I think what a lot of people do is they just kind of probably use. I'm just guessing here, but I'm just going to guess that this is what happened. This was my experience, and this is what
Yeah.
led me to want to start Pay4 in the first place. So I just thought, well, if I give it to a debt collector, the debt collector will know what to do. But in actual fact, what a lot of debt collectors do if they're chasing a debt which is cross-border, i.e., not in the same territory of where they're based, is they'll potentially just give it to a partner company in that territory to deal
so
with.
they're not even driving it themselves.
No, they're not driving it themselves. So they haven't even, when they take that debt from you, they're actually in their mind, they're thinking, well, this won't be my problem.
Right,
and that's exactly what you don't want, So
No,
you really need to have a company. I think
Yeah.
like anything, if you were to hire a company to install a kitchen in your house, you'd want to know, like, well, how, what's the plan? Like, how are we going to do this?
Yeah.
And so I think it's really...
Well, you certainly would want to know that they would want to set it up so they would be able to cook in it and they've got some skin in the game in a way,
Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
that's really the difference between Pay4 and other debt collection companies.
Yeah, for sure.
We don't work with partners worldwide.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when you and I first started speaking, and
Yeah.
we started obviously doing business together, and now you've obviously gone on to have a lot more clients than just TBD, and everything's going fantastic.
Thank you.
I remember that really what appealed to me and what I found interesting was the fact that it really felt like you were taking it on board as almost like a personal thing, right? Where you felt that ultimately someone not paying was an injustice.
Yeah.
And really that shouldn't stand. And I think that will resonate with a lot of people because at the end of the day, what a lot of people don't understand is whether it's your own business or whether you're working with a finance department, that contract, that bill that should be paid is more than just a piece of paper, right? There's a promise that's been made there.
Yeah.
There's a hope. There could be so many things related to that. And somebody defaulting on that, somebody refusing to pay what they owe, really is just a corruption of fundamental, basic human relation.
Yeah.
I made a promise and I'm going back on my promise. And I think that when you're able to take someone's position in terms of defending them, if they're on the wrong side of that and saying, I'm going to help you with that,
Yeah.
because it's unfair that someone's doing that to you, I think resonates with a lot of people. And that's really what I found particularly interesting to me. And I thought, this guy cares. And he
Yeah.
actually is going to go through with it, not because it's part of your business, but just because you think, you know what, screw you. You can't just go around not paying your bill.
I don't like it when people rip other people off, not
Yeah.
each other. I don't like it when, especially smaller companies, are
Yeah.
taken advantage of, and it bothers me a lot. I was actually in that position myself.
Right,
I didn't
okay.
have any, remedy to really do anything about it, other than use debt collectors that didn't really kind of know what they were doing. And I felt like someone needs to take up the mantle for companies that are getting stitched up.
Yeah.
And I really feel passionate about it. And when we get a debt, I like the idea that we can run it through debt collection, but also we can do legal collection as well. And it's not just
for
that.
sure.
It's really how you work with lawyers. You can bring a lawyer in, and you can still continue the debt collection process. You can leverage what that lawyer's doing and kind of pull the lawyer back and try and save your client costs and do some of the communication with the debtor yourself.
Yeah. And it's just another part of the process. I mean, at the end of the day, what matters is the outcome, and the outcome is getting paid.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just another aspect of doing that. So, I completely get it. So, Giles, thanks so much for today.
My pleasure.
I think it was interesting, nice conversations, and hopefully quite useful to other people. And we've hoped that you very much enjoyed this. I would definitely say if you want to see some more of our content, we've got a couple of our other videos that we filmed over the last few weeks that'll be online. So we highly recommend that you go see those. And as a kind of final comment, I would definitely say that we hope that all of this will help you in your business, and we hope that it will help you to better understand how you can go about making sure that you get paid, making sure that you actually collect those invoices. But ultimately, one bit of advice that perhaps I'd like to share with you is the reality is all of this is hypothetical unless you do it. And so sometimes you just have to take that leap of faith. And I would definitely say do your homework, find out who you're doing business with. I mean, obviously, we'd love it if we did business with Pay4. You're definitely in good hands, but perhaps that isn't right for you, or perhaps it just doesn't work for you. Whatever it is that you end up doing, do your research, but then eventually just press the button on it and actually do and start working with someone so that they can help you. So thank you all very much, and we hope to see them probably, next Friday now?
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, lovely. Thanks a lot.
Look forward to it. Cheers, mate.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.